Welcome everyone to the Car-Free Megacities Visions for the Future launch event. I'm Herakan Adiogan. I'm the head of Car-Free Cities at the climate charity Possible, the lead partner in the Car-Free Megacities campaign, and I'm in rainy London right now. I'm so excited to have you all with us today. You could be anywhere in the world this afternoon, and yes, many of you are, but we're all here together in this digital space, and I just want to take a moment to thank you all for your time, your presence, and your energy. Before we get cracking, I'm going to run through the logistics for the next hour and a half. For everyone to have the best possible time, we've created a simple code of conduct, just a reminder of how to be together. So the first thing is we all belong here. We're all responsible for creating a harassment-free experience, so please critique ideas, not people. We won't tolerate harassment of participants or speakers in any form. Anybody violating these rules will be asked to leave or removed at the discretion of the conference organisers. And if you have any concerns about any of this, just email Eleanor, and her email address is on the screen there. The event is being live translated in English and French. You can choose your preferred language by clicking on the interpretation button. That's the globe icon at the bottom right on your Zoom app. The instructions to connect to your language channel are showing on the screen and in the chat right now. Please use the Q&A function only to ask questions to speakers. You can also vote questions up that you're interested in seeing answered, and you can use the chat to react to the presentations. For all social media, the hashtag is #CarFreeMegacities, and we have linked people's socials on the slide so you can connect to the right people online. Please share your thoughts and keep the conversation going over there. The event is being recorded and the recordings will be made available afterwards. Now, the Car-Free Megacities campaign has been running for the past 2 years to raise ambitions on cutting private car use in London, New York, and Paris. From the outset, we're clear a car-free city is a city which is free of the dangers, pollution, and emissions caused by mass private car ownership. It's not a city with no cars at all. We recognise there are many people, including some disabled people, who can't get around without a car, and our campaign to reduce the number of cars in cities will make their lives easier too. It's been an absolute roller coaster of a ride as the campaign was conceived pre-COVID, and many things have changed in those years. And yet, as we've been hearing in COP27, we're still not changing fast enough to prevent climate collapse. And there's been more talk about adaptation and resilience. Today, you'll be hearing from the campaign partners about some of the successes that we've had in the past few years. We'll be discussing some of the fresh polling we commissioned on traffic reduction in our cities. And we're really excited to be launching some bold new visions for our megacities. And of course, we're honoured to have the Deputy Mayors of Transport from London, New York, and Paris with us today too. So let's begin with a quick fire roundup of all of our key achievements. You're going to be hearing a lot of great news and a lot of great work. So I'd like everyone to join me in celebrating these wins. And we'll start with the co-director of the New Weather Institute and co-creator of the Car-Free Megacities project, Andrew Sims, who'll talk about all the wonderful work that Possible and the New Weather Institute have delivered over the last 2 years in London. So take it away, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Hira. So we're going to take you back to the very start of the campaign, when one of our first objectives was to invite people to imagine what cities would be like if the streets had far fewer cars on them. And then, of course, this happened. Perhaps more familiar to people will be scenes like this, when the coronavirus pandemic broke out, and in cities across the world, measures were introduced very quickly that closed streets, encouraged active travel, and acted to try and benefit businesses. But the story goes back longer than that, because actually, sleeping in many of our cities, there have already been the kind of measures that we talk about, measures to reduce the flow of cars in streets, which have become so normal that people barely notice them. Here you can see a street in Newcastle in 1911 with traffic filters. That street is still there today. ironic given some of the controversy that is often caused when measures are introduced to try and reduce traffic. But as Hira said, the climate is still changing faster than we are, with all the air pollution that goes with that. And that means we still need to change. And we live in a culture which is dominated by cars. Here's me as a small child stepping into car culture, and I'm still surrounded by all the signs and signifiers of car culture. Open a magazine, turn on the TV, and there's adverts everywhere for irony-free promotions of some of the most polluting vehicles that there are, the consequences of which can be seen all around us. In 1 year alone in the UK, 150,000 cars were sold that were too big for standard parking spaces. In the space of less than a decade, the worst cars, big polluting SUVs, went from being just sort of 1 in every 10 of new cars sold to 4 in every 10 of new cars sold. And scenes like this are typical on my own street in London. So we needed some change, and that's what Car-Free Megacities was all about. And one of the things that we did was to look at where change has already happened. You'll find on the Car-Free Megacities website a map of the world with case studies of many cities showing you the kind of changes that can be achieved. Already in a city like Freiburg, change has been happening since the 1970s, where bikes have been, the number of journeys taken by bikes has increased threefold, public transport use has doubled, and the percentage of trips taken by car has fallen to less than a third. Or you can look at a city like Strasbourg, where the amount of vehicles were predicted to grow in the 1990s by 60,000 a day in the city, but traffic reduction measures led to a reduction of 40,000. So a net difference of 100,000, really big changes which have been delivered. Or this example from Sweden, where they introduced road user pricing, where before the introduction, 70% opposed, and after the introduction, 70% approved within 5 years of the measures being passed. We found from all these stories and many, many more around the world, one big pattern that is nearly always the same. Initial fears about potentially negative impacts from traffic reduction prove unfounded. And once in place and the benefits have been experienced, people don't want to go back. And the one big lesson for municipal leaders is one of courage, and that the key to success is leaders who practice good communication, are courageous and tenacious, and see things through. But we've done so much more in London with Possible and others. We have, for example, our dashboard, which shows you the sheer range of comparisons between London, Paris, and New York. For example, the different amounts of green space, the sheer amount of space taken up by cars, and many, many more indicators. You can peruse those at your leisure. We've done a lot of media work. You can pop onto the BBC and see some provocative films. You can see the press coverage from all the research work that we've done. You can see amazing initiatives like Possible's Parklets initiative. The Parklets initiative involved writing to councils, developing a tool so that people can promote their own parklets in their own communities. School streets, where again, another action designed to introduce traffic reduction measures at that key moment when children are taken to school and encourage active travel. Research behind it, looking at the dangers of not taking action. Here and in lots of other ways, Possible have been active in empowering local communities to do things differently. Revealing the hidden soundtracks of our cities. This was an example where when you take away the noise of traffic, we reveal the other sounds, sounds of music, sounds of nature. Cargo bikes, the dramatic rise of cargo bikes, how they can increase the speed of delivery by 1.6 times over conventional vans. And looking at some of the issues, the problems to change, and the benefits that can happen from acting to improve access for people who might be disabled, and also some of the blockages about the unequal treatment of people from different ethnic minorities in our city. We have a leaderboard where we can see the progress on action during COVID here, on micro-mobility, action on parklets, action on political will, all the cities doing differently. We've looked at the expansion of the low emission zone in London with some intense lobbying leading to some really progressive chances and really progressive movement ahead. And finally, just to finish, one of my favorite pieces of intervention in the campaign was this: how to turn what might have been once a parking space into a place to put your bikes. Now, I admit, if you look very carefully, you'll see the date on this is the 1st of April. This was an April Fool joke, but with the success of a campaign like Car-Free Megacities, it might just turn into reality. So that's me done. Thank you for listening. And I'm now going to hand over to Doug Gordon from Brooklyn Spoke, who'll tell us a bit about what's been happening in New York.
Thank you, Andrew. Yeah, my name's Doug Gordon. I'm an activist known as Brooklyn Spoke Online. I'm also the co-host of a podcast called The War on Cars. I'm going to keep my presentation rather short because Andrew covered so much that I think applies here, especially the political courage aspect of changing our cities. As New York continues to move forward, hopefully with congestion pricing, I know that once it goes through, it will be popular, but we are seeing a lot of what Andrew has spoken about the debates and the controversies that go with change. So, I think New York has some built-in advantages over London and Paris, as much as I love those cities. The overwhelming majority of people in Manhattan live car-free. And even when you go to the outer boroughs that are more car-dependent than Manhattan, we still see almost half of all households are car-free. And that is far greater than the metro areas of London and Paris. Unfortunately, we are a bit of an outlier when it comes to traffic fatalities per year. I think a lot of that has to do with American car culture, the size and the speed of our vehicles, which are very different than those you'll find in Europe, as most people know. And so we clearly have a lot of work to do. I want to just talk briefly about some of the successes that we have had in New York. Here in May 2021, we hosted our kickoff event, and we welcomed Emily Wiedenhoff, who's the Director of Public Space at the New York City Department of Transportation. And she really was the driving force between the outdoor dining and the open streets and open restaurants program that I think is an area where New York City has really excelled during the pandemic. They basically worked their tails off to put this program together almost overnight, cutting a lot of the red tape that normally would take months and months and months, or even years for some restaurants to apply for outdoor dining and put this together. And of course, it was an instant success. This is Dyckman Street in Upper Manhattan in sort of the before times. And here it is with the open restaurants program. And you can see just what a tremendous success and better use of this space it is. It's generating far more economic activity for the benefit of the restaurants and also the benefit of New York City tax receipts. And I think the interesting thing is that we see this as new, but it's really a return to what streets used to be for. Streets were places of commerce, of socialization, of just meeting other people. This is Mulberry Street around the turn of the 20th century, 1900. And this is Mulberry Street more or less today. And so I think what we're seeing with open streets, as I said, is a return, a sort of back to the future attitude towards our streets that can be used for higher and better purposes. We are welcoming Commissioner Idanis Rodriguez to speak with us later, and I'm so glad that he's here. This administration has gotten off to a really good start. This is Schermerhorn Street in downtown Brooklyn, a key link in the bike network. And as you can see before, it wasn't in great shape. Even without the pavement like this, the bike lane was constantly blocked. It was very dangerous. And in very short order after taking office, Mayor Adams, Commissioner Rodriguez, and our local city council person, Lincoln Ressler, partnered to turn this into a much better and more organized street. And so I really see this as a huge success and the sign of hopefully better things to come. We also here in New York tried to bring awareness to noise pollution. As Andrew said, when you remove cars, you hear the sounds of the city, but far too many New Yorkers live in places where if they are close to an arterial or a highway or other busy road, they are exposed to dangerous levels of noise pollution, just one of the very negative effects of cars. And you can see some of that detail here. We also partnered with a local advocacy organization, Transportation Alternatives, to turn a dead-end street that was basically a parking lot into a plaza for people. It's located right next to a middle school, so it's become a sort of de facto school street. We don't actually have very many of those in New York, but we're starting to get more and to catch up with London and Paris. And the Department of Transportation recently announced, coincidentally, because we'll be talking about this later, that they're exploring some changes to Grand Army Plaza, one of the most iconic sites in Brooklyn. So I sort of wanted to leave it there with maybe a bit of a tease of what's to come, and also just thank DOT for thinking big and moving the conversation forward. And that's it. And now I will hand it off to my colleague, Kathy, in Paris.
Bonjour, moi je suis Cathy. Bonjour, moi je suis Cathy, donc de Paris sans voiture. Merci Doug. Alors, 2 ans de campagne Car Free Megacities avec Paris sans voiture. Ça a été des actions dans les rues, des expériences scientifiques et ludiques, de nombreuses collaborations et partenariats associatifs, des contacts et des rendez-vous avec les politiques et aussi de la presse et des tribunes. Le dimanche 20 septembre 2021, à l'occasion de la journée sans voiture, et après avoir participé à la grande convergence francilienne qui a emmené plus de 5000 cyclistes de tous les coins d'Île-de-France jusqu'à la place de la Concorde, où la ville avait organisé de nombreuses animations en lien avec le vélo, nous avons lancé le départ de notre parade des enfants et des oiseaux, notre première Kidicole Mass à Paris. Alors, une Kidicole Mass, c'est quoi? En fait, l'expression vient de critical mass, masse critique ou vélorution, et de kids. C'est une parade familiale avec des enfants pédalant sur leur propre vélo, transportés par leurs parents ou même sur leur draisienne. Place à la prochaine génération, telle est notre devise, partant du principe qu'une ville adaptée aux enfants est une ville qui nous fait du bien à tous. Ce fut une belle journée sans voiture, mais avec beaucoup de vie dans les rues. En mai 2022, grâce au petit observatoire de la pollution sonore, entrer en immersion dans une capsule audio-temporelle. Écouter l'environnement sonore de Paris évoluer au fil des siècles. Et imaginons ensemble le Paris de demain. En partenariat avec Bruit Paris, nous avons proposé une immersion sonore retraçant l'évolution des activités humaines et leur impact sur la cité et la vie des habitants. Avec pour finir une prospective des bruits de la ville de demain. À la sortie de la capsule, nous avons filmé le public, adultes et enfants, souhaitant témoigner de leur vécu sonore d'habitants d'Île-de-France. En fait, l'objectif de cette expérience ludique et participative était de susciter une prise de conscience par le prisme du bruit jusqu'à imaginer la ville de demain. Et à notre grande surprise, une centaine de personnes a fait la queue pour participer à l'expérience. Nous avons aussi organisé la 2e Kidicole Mass parisienne et avons eu le plaisir d'accueillir Simone Cross, l'initiative des Kidicole Mass. Nous sommes partis de l'Académie du climat, dans le 1er arrondissement, pour une traversée de Paris avec nos jeunes cyclistes en herbe, tous en sécurité au cœur d'une parade festive et rythmée par le chant des oiseaux du Solar Sound System. L'arrivée dans le 19e arrondissement, après 6 km quand même de slow vélo, a permis de profiter des festivités de la grande rue aux enfants de Cafézoïde, le café des enfants. Et toujours en mai, avec l'Académie du climat, nous avons également participé à l'organisation de la Parade, la grande parade musicale à vélo et on a proposé un atelier de customisation de roues de vélo. Pour la journée sans voiture Paris Respire en septembre 2022, donc cette année, nous avons participé à la mobilisation pour une journée sans voiture plus ambitieuse, avec Alternativa, Greenpeace et La Rue est à nous, nos partenaires. Ce jour-là, nous avons également créé un parklet végétalisé sur plusieurs places de stationnement. Ça nous a permis de débattre avec de nombreux passants de la place des voitures en ville, de la réappropriation de l'espace public et aussi du besoin de végétation dans nos grandes villes. Voilà, un petit tour de nos principales actions dans les rues de Paris. Et maintenant, je passe la parole à Andrew.
Thank you so much, Kathy. And now we're getting to the bit which I've been looking forward to. This is going to be our big reveal, if you like, on some polling after the last 2 years of upheaval and the experiences of the pandemic that you've heard about from everybody so far, the experiences of having streets with fewer cars on, so we know how different things can be. What is it going to look like? So we're going to take you through the polling results, but I think we're going to begin with a little bit of a poll of our own. We're going to be asking you a question. And I think this is going to kind of pop up on the screen any second now, in which we're going to invite you to guess what percentage of the respondents in our poll agreed with this statement. Our city centres should be completely car-free, except for access for disabled people car clubs, that's like a car sharing system, and taxis. And we've got 4 choices here, going from right at the top, really bold and ambitious targets there, London 51%, Paris 45%, New York 49%, to an even bolder one, it was London 69%. Do we are Londoners that enthusiastic? Or right down to London at 23%, Paris 38%, New York 76%. So have a guess, have a click, see if you can guess how our respondents felt about the prospect of city centres going completely car-free apart from those exceptions. Okay, that is, we can't vote, so it's down to you to vote. It's down to you to vote. And with that, I'm going to take you through the rest of our results now. This was a survey that was conducted over the course of 2 days with almost the same number of polling of adults polled in London, Paris, and New York, all just over 1,000. And the first question we put to people was simply, how much do you care about climate change? And this was the result that we got. Pretty similar across all the 3 big cities. The pink bar there, perhaps surprising, is, people who said that they don't care, but the reassuring thing that around 4/5 of people in all the 3 cities do care about the issue. The next question we put to people was what they thought about the need for more political ambition, that leaders should be more ambitious in their policies. And again, people in all 3 cities were asked, and this was the result we got. Again, some even higher figures here, but again, consistent across all 3 cities, 82% in London, 84% in Paris, and 79% in New York. And again, the blue bars there are for people who neither agree nor disagree, and the pink is for people who don't agree. The next thing we did, because this is obviously breaks down into a range of different concerns in the way that we experience traffic in our cities. So we gave people a range of options to say, what were the things that bothered them most? What were their concerns most about high levels of private car use in cities? And we got a different picture back from each of the cities, and it looked something like this. So you can see some fairly common concerns are coming up near the top of the list across all 3 cities. with air pollution being the most concerned in London, dangerous driving in Paris and New York, but pretty similar. The one different one, perhaps, is the noise pollution concern, which came up amongst people in Paris. On the longer list, it should also be said that just outside this range of concerns, there were still large numbers of people who were bothered about things like the amount of space taken up by large cars, especially SUVs. Noise pollution is just off the bottom of those lists for London and New York as well. But also a big concern was the lack of protected bike lanes. But you can see these issues, that pollution, the congestion from the sheer volume of traffic, dangerous driving, air pollution, and pavement quality coming up consistently across all of those. So next, what we asked people was about their experience of that strange time during the lockdown when things were different and what people liked about it. And we put the question to people: having less traffic on city streets was something I liked about the coronavirus lockdowns. And we got, again, a really consistent high level of agreement across all three cities, with the blue bars representing people who neither agreed nor disagreed, and fairly slim pink bars for the people there who did not agree. So it's clearly something that different experience was something that people thought well about. And of course, one of the things that went along with having less traffic was people having a different experience of their cities. So next we asked people about their attitudes to reconnecting with nature in their urban spaces during that period of time. And we got this response from people. When asked if they appreciated local nature more with much less traffic during the coronavirus lockdowns. And again, we're seeing consistently high figures across the board for all three cities, with the blue bars representing people who didn't have an opinion one way or the other. And again, very slim minorities for people for whom it is not a statement that they would agree with. So that was asking people to reflect on the experience of the pandemic. And next, we asked them to look ahead about and think about the kind of cities that they would like to see from now on. And so obviously, our campaign has been called Car-Free Megacities. So we asked people if they would like to see fewer cars in our cities. And this is the response that we got. Still, looking ahead, consistently high responses from people who would now like to see fewer cars in our cities. 72% in both London and New York, and perhaps Paris, which has perhaps got a little bit further ahead in its traffic reduction measures than the other two cities, perhaps not feeling the need to go as far, but still a consistently high proportion. Now, just before we get to the last question, where we're going to see how many people have gone on a big enough journey to want to make the jump to seeing their city centres being effectively car-free, apart from access for disabled people, car clubs and taxis. I think we can now see the results of the polling that we've done with all of you to see whether your guesses were close. So the highest number of votes goes to London 51, Paris 45, New York 49. And the lowest number of votes, they're going for that fourth option, London 23, Paris 38, New York 76. So that's interesting. Let's find out, shall we, what the real answer is and see how well you all guess. So I can reveal that the number of people, the proportion of our respondents who would like to see city centres effectively car-free, apart from those three categories, is this. That's a suspense rising drum roll there. So after the 2 years and more of the pandemic, we've arrived at a situation where around about half, just over in London's case, just under in Paris's case, but about a half of the population, which is incredibly significant. If you think about London, any of these cities, you're talking about millions of people who would like to see their city centres effectively totally car-free, except for those special criteria. And then the blue bars again, people who neither disagreed nor agreed. meaning that the majority here, if it were put to a straight vote, this is a step that we would collectively be taking to make our city centres effectively car-free. Now, I hope that's proved interesting for you, and it's food for thought for everybody, not just our citizens, but our decision makers. And I'll hand back to the rest of the panel with that. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrew. We're now going to talk about the visions we've put together over this autumn in London, Paris, and New York. And I'm going to start off by talking about Hyde Park Corner. So this is a picture taken just a few weeks ago of Hyde Park Corner. It's located between Knightsbridge, Belgravia, and Mayfair. It lies between Hyde Park and Green Park, and it's not far from Buckingham Palace, the Houses of Parliament, and other iconic London landmarks. As you can see, it's a roundabout that's essentially an urban motorway. There are between 4 and 6 lanes for motor traffic, and the A4 runs directly underneath it. 6 streets feed into this busy junction. But it wasn't always like this. Hyde Park Corner used to be thought of unofficially as the entrance to London. This is a picture from the early 1890s. There are horses and carriages sharing the space with pedestrians. It's estimated that there were no more than 15 cars in Britain at this time. And by 1900, there were approximately 700 cars in Britain, and this figure continued to shoot up. So by 1930, there were 1 million cars in Britain. This is a postcard of Hyde Park Corner from 1937, showing what cars were beginning to do to our street space. Here's a short clip showing Hyde Park Corner in 1948, in which it's described as one of the capital's busiest traffic junctions.
The Wellington Arch overlooking Hyde Park Corner, the topographical centre of London and one of the capital's busiest traffic junctions.
So this is what Hyde Park Corner looks like today. People have described it as a disaster, hostile, anxiety-inducing, and they're concerned about pollution. So we brought together 9 Londoners from diverse backgrounds, some local to the area, some from further afield. We wanted to discuss, explore, and workshop ideas to produce visions of what a utopic future could look like. And here's what they came up with. Now, I want you to imagine it's a late afternoon on Saturday, 20th July 2030. You've just left a beautiful picnic in Hyde Park and are making your way over to Green Park. You begin to cross the large, expansive civic space that now surrounds Wellington Arch. You enjoy strolling down the wide walkways lined with lush green trees. The shade and the cooling breeze are most welcome. Birds fly in the sky, butterflies dance amongst the flora. There are boards explaining the rich biodiversity in the area. Sounds of life surround you. Some teens are excitedly recording a routine for their social media. A family is trying to get their toddler to take their first steps. A food delivery driver is taking a break before their next gig and helps themselves to some fruit from the fruit tree. An older person is lying on the smooth, comfortable benches, taking it all in. People can cycle through here, and with the blue protected cycleways, many people do. But pedestrians ultimately have right of way. There's lots of cycle storage nearby with charging points for e-bikes, all solar powered. As you get closer to the arch, you catch glimpses of music, one of the many free public concerts that get put on in the amphitheatre. You stop at a drinking fountain to fill up your water bottle and pause to savour the melody. You smile to yourself as you remember that just a few years ago, this place was a polluting, congested road junction. Now it's safer, calmer, healthier, happier, a place for people and nature, not cars. So we think this vision is very achievable. We want to do to Hyde Park what was long ago done to Trafalgar Square when the National Gallery was reunited with Nelson's Column and the square. We want to peninsulise it, stopping the traffic on 2 arms and turning that area into land for people to walk on. Buses and taxis can still go through. And by doing this, you could connect Hyde Park with Wellington Arch. We also want bus lanes all around the revised set of 2-way roads and the managing of other vehicle flows down to 1 lane in either direction. So as you heard from Andrew, we did some polling. We first asked 1,000 Londoners whether they would support the pedestrianisation of Hyde Park Corner to link it up with Green Park. And 49% agreed, 27% disagreed, and 23% said they don't know. We then presented them with this image and asked, imagine what a pedestrianised Hyde Park Corner could look like this image. To what extent would you support or oppose the pedestrianisation of Hyde Park Corner? Support shot up to 72% agreeing, with only 10% opposing, and still 14% were just in the middle, and 3% said they didn't know. So we hope this has given our panel and our audience lots to think about and will spark conversations, help build support for our car-free cities, and inspire hope and optimism. I'm going to give the floor to Kathy in Paris, followed by Doug and Juan at Transalt in New York, to present our visions for the future in these two cities. Thank you.
Merci Ira. Le samedi 24 septembre, l'équipe Car-Free Megacity s'est réunie en atelier à l'Académie du climat pour réinventer la place de la Concorde, lieu emblématique du Paris touristique, historique, mais aussi de l'emprise automobile. La mission de la quinzaine de participants volontaires fut d'imaginer la place de la Concorde de demain. Nous avons recruté des Parisiennes et des Parisiens engagés pour le climat, pour la pratique du vélo, de l'agriculture urbaine et de la citoyenneté. Et aussi convié des spécialistes associatifs comme MDB, Mieux se déplacer à bicyclette, Rue de l'Avenir et bien sûr Paris sans voiture. Alors avant d'aller plus loin, un petit peu d'histoire. La place de la Concorde est la plus grande place de Paris. À l'origine, c'est un grand jardin à la française, vous voyez en haut à droite. Elle a connu de nombreuses évolutions jusqu'à devenir au XXe siècle un immense carrefour clairement dédié à la circulation automobile. Les piétons et les cyclistes y sont en danger. Quiconque souhaite aujourd'hui traverser à pied ces 8 hectares et demi devra franchir 20 voies de circulation sans croiser un seul arbre ni bosquet. Cette place entre deux jardins est totalement minérale. Située sur la rive droite dans le 8e arrondissement, elle relie les Champs-Élysées en haut, à gauche sur la photo, pardon, au jardin des Tuileries à droite et la rue Royale en haut, aux berges de la Seine en bas. Alors, 3 groupes de personnes ont donc travaillé sur plan, assistés si besoin par l'équipe encadrante. 3 thématiques ont été travaillées. Se déplacer, renaturer, vivre et faire vivre. Lorsque les groupes se sont rejoints et à notre grande surprise, la vision commune a été assez évidente à définir. Alors, voilà donc notre Concorde. La place est largement rendue aux piétons, aux vélos, ce sont les pistes en jaune, et aux activités citoyennes. La végétation et l'eau y sont prédominantes. La circulation motorisée est cantonnée sur les bords de la place pour maintenir une traversée nord-sud par la large contre-allée, en blanc sur le plan. Le bas des Champs-Élysées est piétonnisé, ainsi que le quai de Seine, créant un accès direct au fleuve. Une nouvelle sortie de métro permet d'accéder au centre de la place, qui abrite en son cœur des petites boutiques éphémères et restaurations de qualité, mais aussi un espace pique-nique avec ses nombreuses tables en accès libre. 4 grands espaces reliés entre eux par de larges allées en pavé enherbé couvrent l'ensemble de la place. Alors, en haut à droite, un espace de prairie spontanée avec des mares pour la phytoremédiation est accessible à tous. En bas à droite, un espace boisé, sanctuaire de biodiversité et d'agroforesterie, avec une ferme coopérative urbaine et son point de vente et d'apprentissage de techniques ancestrales. En bas, à gauche, un espace boisé de détente culturelle, avec des boîtes à livres, à jeux, des hamacs, pour accueillir une expression pardon, j'oubliais, en bord de Seine, une mini-plage et surtout une agora citoyenne pour accueillir une expression libre et divers spectacles. En haut, à gauche, un espace à investir en fonction des projets citoyens, circuits d'apprentissage et réparation de vélos, jeux de plein air, marché. Une prairie descend en pente douce vers la Seine et un petit port au ponton flottant. Le parking en sous-sol, ouvert aux artistes, est transformé en champignonnière et en discothèque. Les toits des bâtiments alentours sont végétalisés. Alors ici, vous pouvez voir que 58% des Parisiens interrogés seraient d'accord pour transformer la Concorde et laisser plus d'espace aux personnes et à la nature, alors que 28% ne sont pas d'accord. Voilà la Concorde telle qu'elle est aujourd'hui. Après avoir vu l'image qui va suivre, les opposants à la piétonisation sont passés de 28% à 13% et les favorables de 58 à 69%. Alors voilà donc la vision de la place de la Concorde telle que nous l'avons réinventée et qui a fait progresser de plus de 11% les avis favorables. Du coup, notre Concorde est devenue une place vivante et accueillante, tant pour les habitants que pour la biodiversité urbaine. La circulation motorisée se fait oublier, un îlot de fraîcheur au cœur de la capitale. Notre Concorde est prête pour affronter les défis climatiques qui se profilent. Merci de vos écoutes. Et maintenant, à Rouen.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for the time. My name is Juan Restrepo. I am the manager of a team of community organizers at Transportation Alternatives. We teamed up with Possible and Doug Gordon to do a redesign of an iconic space in New York City. For us, that iconic space is Grand Army Plaza. Grand Army Plaza is the pedestrian space adjacent to Prospect Park, which is one of our most famous parks in Brooklyn, right next to Central Park. Doug's presentation after mine is going to feature more details about it, but I wanted to focus most of my presentation on sort of the way that we would add to this conversation, which is that we take an organizing element to a lot of our campaigns. So when Doug brought up this opportunity, I thought it'd be great if we could talk about something that is an active campaign that we are putting volunteer manpower to. We have a community organizer, Kathy, who organizes in Brooklyn, and we're able to connect both the big vision that we're proposing here at Possible with an actual group of volunteers and passionate advocates in the community who are working on it as well. We have an active campaign for it, and that campaign has over 2,000 petition signatures. We've activated volunteers in the community, including like this great little sign to attract people's attention. And we've done dozens of in-person activities on the Grand Army Plaza corridor and next to Prospect Park. We've engaged with multiple elected officials through that process, including the previous Mayor de Blasio over here with the sign. And we've also engaged plenty of the new crop of elected officials who are on the corridor as well. So what's really exciting about this time, and the timing is just serendipitous, and I think potentially DOT Commissioner Rodriguez Udanes will speak about this as well. While we were hosting a visioning process with Possible, which I'll talk about in a second, the Department of Transportation has also been engaging the visioning process themselves for this area. So it's really exciting to see both of these processes happening at the same time. So for our process, which we did with a local architecture firm, we brought together disability advocates, local advocates from the park, from the library, advocates who live in the Prospect Park adjacent area. And we came together and we created a visioning plan, which Doug is going to talk about. But simultaneously, there was also a hugely well-attended visioning process that the city did. Over 300 people attended a virtual session. We created this great little image to highlight that it was happening. And it's, again, really, really exciting that we could take part in this. And we're really looking forward to seeing what the final vision that comes out of this is from the Possible end. So with that, I believe I'm turning it over to Doug.
Great. Thanks, Juan. I'll try to go quickly because we're running a little over, and I want to make sure our elected officials and other representatives from different cities get their chance to speak fully. So, great.
I'm so sorry. I have one more slide.
Yeah. I'll get to this in mind, I think. So I'll move forward if that's all right. Thank you, Juan. Okay, so if you don't live in Brooklyn and you think of iconic locations, you probably think of the Brooklyn Bridge. But if you live in Brooklyn, the second most iconic spot probably is Grand Army Plaza. This is the Soldier and Sailors Arch. It was dedicated in 1892, but the plaza that it sits on is actually a little older. It was designed to be a grand entrance to Prospect Park by Olmsted and Vaux. You can see the detail of Grand Army Plaza, or Prospect Park Plaza as it would have been known before the monument went up in 1870. And you can see how it kind of seamlessly connects to the park on the left side of your screen. And this is the plaza in 1894. It seamlessly connects to the park. This is looking straight out from the park towards the arch on the left. But today, the plaza has been eroded over time by automobiles. And it really is just basically what I like to call a sea of asphalt. It's a little island sitting there amidst this tangled mess of traffic. It's very unsafe to cross. It's very unpleasant to be near. It's very loud. It takes multiple signal phases for pedestrians and cyclists to make it from one side of the circle to the other, and it sort of just doesn't work for anybody. Safety has always been a huge problem in Grand Army Plaza. This is the deathometer that actually originally stood at Brooklyn Borough Hall. And our mayor, Mayor Adams, was a former Brooklyn Borough president, his former office. So that's where it stood until it was moved to Grand Army Plaza in 1927. And it tracked the number of fatal accidents, as it says on the sign, and seriously injured, as it says at the top. Over time, there have been efforts to tame this beast of a traffic circle. This is from 2006. There was an early effort by GAPCO, the Grand Army Plaza Coalition of local neighborhood stakeholders and city planners, who tried to do something to make it a little more pedestrian and cyclist friendly and to organize the traffic. And that resulted in the images that you see here before 2010 on the left, and after DOT implemented a few changes, including two-way protected bike lanes, more crosswalks, wider crosswalks, shorter pedestrian crossings, building out the plaza on the right side of the image there, and making it a little safer. So it's better. It's still not great, but it's a lot better than it used to be. Grand Army Plaza serves a lot of functions, and this informed our workshop. There's a weekly green market on Saturdays. It's also a very important civic space, as we saw, especially during the summer of 2020, during the Black Lives Matter George Floyd protests. There are lots of events that happen here, but it's a really important civic space, and we wanted to make sure that whatever we did preserved these functions very well. The other thing that we don't really think about as Brooklynites is just how much public space is available to us at Grand Army Plaza. For comparison, this is Washington Square Park on the right in New York City's Greenwich Village, and they're roughly the same size, only the difference is that Grand Army Plaza is largely dedicated to the movement of automobiles, of trucks, and of buses. And I apologize for the sound behind me. You might be hearing a truck backing up, which is perhaps rather appropriate for this segment of the presentation. But even Washington Square Park used to be a place for cars. This is around the 1960s. Cars were allowed to drive through well into the 1950s. Cars were allowed to be parked there through the 1960s. So we know that change is possible. As Juan mentioned, DOT has just begun workshops to tame Grand Army Plaza, to engage the community with different design options that would use capital dollars, that's pouring out in concrete and building out spaces permanently so that everybody can enjoy this space. And the options range from sort of preserving it as is and building out the existing spaces all the way to a dramatic reimagining of the plaza. So well, we think actually that we could go a bit farther. This is the current status of Grand Army Plaza. You can just see this tangled network of roads. We think we should really try to imagine basically reconnecting the park with the arch, cutting off some of the roadway, still allowing for traffic circulation from Flatbush Avenue to continue through the area, because it is an important connector to deeper into Brooklyn from downtown. So we think that that should be preserved as much as possible. When we asked people, with the polling that Andrew was talking about, should Grand Army Plaza be pedestrianized to connect it, 60% of respondents agreed, 19% disagreed. So we were already starting off with a pretty high agreement here. And this was our before picture that we were working with. And in our workshop that Juan mentioned, we had all kinds of great ideas. Not all of them could be summed up in one image. But basically, we went from this sea of asphalt, and this is relatively clear, usually it is jammed with cars, to something looking more like this. Again, this is not really a prescriptive idea. It is a visioning, something to spur our imaginations. The first and foremost goal is that it would connect the plaza and the arch to the park, so no need for complicated crossings for pedestrians or multiple signal phases for cyclists. There would be more shade to deal with rising temperatures, but it would still preserve the open space for protests and other large gatherings. You can see permanent stalls, the green striped awnings on the right side for green market vendors and other vendors. Permeable pavement would allow the area to capture intense rainstorms that we're seeing from climate change while still blending in with the existing pavement that we see in the historic part of the park to the left. A lot of people have really great ideas for, there's a fountain that you can't see, to expand access to that and add water features, which would also be very helpful. It gets very hot at this part of Brooklyn, especially with climate change. Grand Army Plaza is also an important transit hub. So we have included references to the current bus lines that come through and perhaps a more futuristic light rail line. You can also see that we've added permanent seating for people coming through here and making the place more accessible while still providing access for emergency access, fire trucks, ambulances, and service vehicles. Again, not prescriptive, but I think it's a really wonderful reimagining that I hope really moves us beyond what we are currently imagining for Grand Army Plaza. And back to that polling, when this image was shown to people, the number of people who agreed that we should pedestrianize Grand Army Plaza shot up from 60% agreeing to 74% agreeing. So we can really see the importance that having these images available does to public perception. I think that's a lesson that all cities should take from this. So again, just to really sort of reiterate, we are imagining going from something like this at its current state to something like this. So thank you very much. And I will now hand it back off. Oh, actually, it's going off to David Billard in Paris, but I think Hira is going to speak first to introduce him.
Okay, thanks so much. So we've had a look at some of our brand new visions for this work, and I'm so pleased and so honored to be joined by key leaders from our 3 cities. At Possible, we always try to maintain a critical awareness of power and privilege. So whilst we recognize that this will be a panel of all men, they are the right people to be speaking to. They have the influence and the budgets to make change happen, and they're here to share what they're going to do to make sure everyone can get around our cities more sustainably. They're also here to answer your questions. And in my role as chair, I want to encourage everyone to put forward your questions so that we can get the breadth of perspectives in attendance today. So we were going to go to David Belliard first, but I know that Seb Dance has to leave us shortly. So we're going to go straight to Seb Dance, who is Deputy Mayor of Transport in London first. Thank you, Seb.
Thank you very much, Hira, and apologies to David for stealing his spot. To apologise for that. Listen, it's great to be here this afternoon or this morning, in fact, if you're joining us from New York, for a friendly discussion of the competition between three of the greatest cities in the world, Paris, New York, and London. And it's very exciting to hear many of the ideas that have been put forward for those cities. I'm obviously intrigued by the proposal on Hyde Park Corner, which is certainly not without imagination. I think I think you talked about an older person lying on the bench contemplating things. I think probably by 2030, the state of this job, I think that might be me contemplating how far we've come in traffic reduction. But yes, clearly these ideas are extremely welcome. And although it's difficult as things stand to imagine the inner ring road being severed, I welcome any and every proposal to reduce car use. So we will certainly study it in a lot of detail. As we know, I believe I have some slides which may or may not appear. Aha, fantastic, there we are. There's the new City Hall that you can see there with a cable car that runs by it. That's not the mainstay of our traffic reduction proposals, but it is clearly yet another part of the transport mix that helps diversify the mix. I think if I could go to the next slide, please. Perfect, thank you. So this is the front cover of the Mayor's Transport Strategy, which we devised in 2018. This really is at the heart of our traffic reduction proposals. It's not just a sort of bureaucratic document, but it's very much as the name suggests, a strategy and a vision for creating a much fairer, more prosperous, greener city. The strategy is what I'm basically charged with delivering on behalf of the Mayor, Sadiq Khan. Its overarching aim is to reduce traffic, but by 2041, our central goal is to have 80% of all journeys across Greater London conducted by both public and active transport, which of course includes walking, cycling. So it's not exactly a car-free city that we're envisaging. And here you made the point excellently at the beginning that car-free cities is not about eliminating the car, but it's about a much more sensible mix. Because quite frankly, we know that the car has been at the center of many debates about what it means to live in the West and what it means to live in a free society. And we're in effect battling 100 or more years of ingrained orthodoxy as to what it means to live in a free society and a society where we have choices. And it's very much a case of saying that the predominance of cars in our cities has actually reduced that freedom. So changing that mindset is a really difficult aspect. So we have to have a whole suite of policies which are designed to reduce car use, but we also have to demonstrate that this is in everybody's interest. It's not about attacking things that we hold dear, notions of choice and freedom, but actually about enhancing what it is to live in a free city. At the citywide scale, therefore, we've got the aim of reducing car use. It's central to our plan. It's central to our long-term strategic plan for the city. It's most clearly set out in many of the strict parking-related standards that we have in place. But also, it's part of our policy on housing as well. So housing developments with the best public transport connections must now be built without parking spaces for residents. And that means that there is now a growing number of Londoners living in brand new homes, many of which are affordable. And that is another part of our strategy, of course, where they cannot, unless they are disabled and holders of a particular exemption, they cannot get a parking permit. And the design, the purpose of that is obviously to encourage people to give up their car when they move into the new homes. Next slide, please. Of course, we invented mass transit 159 years ago in this city with the Metropolitan Railway. In 1863. This was the first underground railway anywhere in the world and has, of course, since expanded to encompass many different modes of transport, not just London Underground, but also the Docklands Light Railway, which is in effect a separate metro system that runs in East London. We obviously have a number of other initiatives that we have learned from other cities. Our purpose, obviously, is to make London a city where you do not need a car. We're slightly shamed by Manhattan in respect of the figures that were shown earlier. 62% of households across London do not own a car, but obviously that's much higher in central London than it is in outer London. But clearly we have a way to go before we match Manhattan's level of non-car ownership. But in addition, obviously, to the legacy network that we have, the world's oldest metro system, we also have and continue to invest in new infrastructure as well, including, as you see in front of you, the Elizabeth line, named after the late Queen and opened this year. I see just Boris Johnson's head sticking out there. That's Sadiq Khan is behind the Queen there. The Elizabeth line is the newest addition to the transport network and actually pays homage to the French, the Parisian system, the RER, which invented, if you like, the idea of a high-speed, rapid commuter rail network running through the centre of the city. Well, London now joins Paris in having the system that enables people to commute far and wide from outside the city and travel through the central tunnels without changing onto the metro system. And it has revolutionized the way that people travel. We're also extending other elements of the transport network. The London Overground system has recently been extended to another housing development in Barking Riverside. And of course, all of this is done despite the headwinds that we have at the moment, with a reduction in government support that we have, and obviously a reduction in fare revenue owing to different patterns of travel, with fewer people traveling in the morning and evening commuter peaks. So we are having to adapt to a different era. But the key thing here is, and we heard from the Transport Secretary, his central government secretary earlier today, who said again that building key infrastructure generates demand itself. So we know that when you build it, people will use it. And the Elizabeth line, I should say, is an extremely intensively used transport system now in the capital, despite having been opened only for a few months. If I could go to the next slide, please. Road user charging. So reducing car use, in addition to the many, many carrots that we can point to, it does also require some sticks. London has been a world leader in road user charging, having had the congestion charge in the central zone since the early 2000s, and more recently expanding, as was mentioned earlier by Andrew, the ultra low emission zone. Over this summer just gone, we consulted on expanding this zone to most of outer London in the summer of next year, in 2023. And a decision on whether or not to proceed on that will be forthcoming by the end of the year. This is a charging scheme that really helps us clean up London's air. Most vehicles need to meet the ULEZ emission standards or pay a £12.50 daily charge to drive inside the zone. That's about $15, €15 as of today, although the exchange rate keeps changing, but that's another conversation. If this scheme were expanded, if we do indeed decide to expand the ultra low emission zone, it would have a significant impact by the end of 2023, estimated to reduce the number of vehicles not meeting the ULEZ standards from 160,000 vehicles across London to 46,000, and the number of vans from 42,000 to 26,000. The consultation this year also asked Londoners to help shape the future of road user charging, which could eventually include scrapping the existing schemes and replacing them with a single scheme that would use sophisticated technology to make it as simple and as fair as possible for Londoners. So that could include, for example, looking at the type of vehicle that's driven, which many of the existing standards already do, looking at the time of day that the vehicle is driven, the purpose of the journey, but also crucially, the area of the city that is being driven in, where, for example, there aren't many alternatives, there aren't many public transport options, then necessarily it would be cheaper to drive than in areas where there are alternative options. And that in turn then enables us to plan better, because we can identify those areas of the city where there are fewer public transport options and target our investment and support for additional networks in those places, because ultimately we want it to be as convenient to be car-free in outer London as it is for inner London. I can only see some of the comments coming in, but I completely agree with the one that I just saw out of the corner of my eye. Yes, we have a long way to go in making the public case for this, and I'm sure we'll talk about more of that as we go forward. Next slide, please. In order to get more people out of their cars, we of course need to change how our streets work, and the scale of the street is also where a lot of the action is, as we've seen from great visions created from this event that we are just talking at today. The crucial point to me, and I keep referring to this, although I sometimes get my figures mixed up in public meetings, but I have them written down for you so that I won't. A third of car trips made by Londoners, a third of all car trips made by Londoners could be walked in under 25 minutes, and 2/3 could be cycled in under 20 minutes. So walking and cycling have a huge role to play in reducing car travel. Too many Londoners still feel that our streets are not safe enough, that they are dominated by cars and other vehicles. You just see this image in front of you. This, by the way, is part of a junction that has now changed. But would you feel safe as that cyclist in front of the truck and the coach there, with a car on the inside as well? You can see that it's a very intimidating environment to be in. If we can go to the next slide, you'll see the same street now. That's why when we have schemes to reduce traffic dominance, such here, as you see, closing off one arm of a major junction, which we've done also at Highbury Corner, and we're also doing at Old Street, you see that people will use the space. The pedestrian barriers, by the way, are temporary for the event that we see, the skateboarding event that we see. Normally those barriers are not there, and it is a pedestrian space. Previously, this was one of the busiest roads in central London, and we're working with Westminster City Council. We have a slightly complicated governance scheme in London, where the Greater London Authority that I represent work with the 32 London boroughs individually, and Westminster City Council is one of those 32 plus the City of London, so it's actually 33 borough councils that we work with. It includes some great show spaces as well, and event spaces that, as you can see, can be transformed into one-off events that demonstrate the cultural life of the city. And if we move to the next slide, we'll see this is what the final vision is of the Strand, and it's a fully integrated public space where people can enjoy the urban environment in a way in which, let's face it, it was intended. If we move to the next slide, you'll see an example of a low traffic neighbourhood, which is where we work with those boroughs, the 33 that I mentioned earlier, to reduce through traffic on residential roads by creating low traffic neighbourhoods. This is a recent example from Haringey, which is in North London. These LTNs, the low traffic neighbourhoods, have been around for many decades in London, but they really first took off in Waltham Forest with a mini Holland programme, and more recently, of course, as a response to the pandemic, where hundreds have been installed across the city cheaply and effectively. If we move to the next slide, we'll see some of the smaller interventions that have been taking place with the boroughs inside the LTNs. We mentioned parklets earlier and cycle parking space. I know it was an April Fool image, Andrew, but that image of the car being open to reveal the cycle space was brilliant, because of course it demonstrates in ways that words can't, just how more efficient in terms of space and much more friendly to the urban environment the bike is than the car. If we move to the next slide, we'll see since the start of the pandemic, we've created more car-free high streets, which will give people more space around them when they go shopping. So high streets are basically the main boulevards and thoroughfares in each neighbourhood where shops tend to be located. And here you see Stoke Newington Church Street and Broadway Market in Hackney and Bishopsgate in the City of London being good examples of where that has happened. If we move to the next slide, you can see that in central London, we have worked with boroughs to reclaim the space for people to sit and to eat. This was previously a rat run for taxis and would often be full of vehicles loading and unloading. And clearly that also had an impact on the trade for some of these establishments, many of whom found it their frontages were rendered much less attractive than they are at the moment. And finally, if I can move to the final slide, for the School Streets project, which is the last program that I want to mention today, because we're working with boroughs and schools to restrict traffic from outside schools at drop-off and pick-up times. This obviously reduces air pollution for kids, but it also helps to encourage an atmosphere where people don't tend to drive to school, where driving to school is seen as very much a problem and less attractive an option than it is to walk and to cycle. We now have more than 500 of these school streets and they're counting, I should say, across London. They're proving very popular, particularly with children who value the fact that they can move about in front of their school and meet their friends and walk home in a safe environment without having to navigate cars and other vehicles that would otherwise pose a danger, both physically and in terms of the air that they breathe in the immediate vicinity of their school. That's all I wanted to say by way of presentation. I'm very sorry that I have to shoot off very shortly, but I have seen some of the questions and I'm sure some of them will make their way to me, but by all means, feel free to email me at any point. All my details are very clearly available on the GLA website. When you search for the Greater London Authority, click on the image of Sadiq Khan and you'll see his team is listed below, and I'm very easy to get hold of. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Seb. Yeah, there were loads of questions popping off. We're going to collate those and send them over to you and hopefully get those published on our website, because I know there's a lot going on there around congestion charge and the cycle hire scheme and UDES expansion and all sorts. But thank you so much for your time. So I'm going to turn to David Belliard, who is part of the executive team to the Mayor of Paris in charge of transport, for his presentation about what's been happening in Paris.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Merci beaucoup pour votre invitation et sur un sujet évidemment très important et surtout très politique, sur la réduction de la place de la voiture et d'une certaine manière l'avenir de nos métropoles telles qu'elles se configurent par rapport aux grands enjeux qui sont des enjeux partagés entre l'ensemble de nos villes, les enjeux d'accélération des dérèglements climatiques, les enjeux de santé publique et des enjeux de réaménagement, de reconfiguration, de redesign d'une certaine manière de l'ensemble de l'espace public qui devient un élément clé dans cette transformation de la ville, longtemps allouée, adressée à l'automobile. Et c'est vrai par exemple à Paris, encore aujourd'hui, la moitié de l'espace public parisien est alloué soit par les routes, par les avenues ou par le stationnement en surface. Eh bien, la moitié de cet espace public est encore adressé aujourd'hui à la voiture dans une ville comme Paris. Et on sait que nous devons aller vers une réduction qui est une direction drastique et plutôt une répartition de cet espace public qui est extrêmement rare, extrêmement précieux, extrêmement utile, notamment dans une ville qui est très dense comme la capitale française. Alors, ce que nous cherchons à faire, effectivement, c'est le rééquilibrage. Et ce rééquilibrage, évidemment, c'est des éléments techniques. Je vais revenir sur l'ensemble des dispositifs que nous avons mis en place, mais c'est aussi, évidemment, un enjeu qui est un enjeu politique. J'ai vu votre sondage sur les 45% de Parisiens qui seraient OK pour dire qu'il ne faut plus de voitures du tout à Paris. Et je m'en réjouis parce que c'est un chiffre évidemment très encourageant. Mais à ces 45% et à cette aspiration-là répond aussi une aspiration conservatrice, voire parfois très réactionnaire sur ces transformations avec une part de la population qui aujourd'hui est opposée à la politique que nous sommes en train de mener et qui est pourtant, je le crois en tout cas, une politique qui va dans le sens de l'histoire et qui répond encore une fois aux grands enjeux. Nous avons vu l'espace public, l'opinion publique, pardon, le débat parisien se cristalliser, se polariser ces dernières années avec la montée de soi-disant mouvements citoyens, notamment sur les réseaux sociaux. Je pense en particulier à Saccage Paris, qui sont en fait l'émanation de ce groupe conservateur qui refuse aujourd'hui de changer sur des dimensions, s'appuyant d'ailleurs sur des dimensions patrimoniales. Je voulais simplement pour dire que Paris était une très belle ville et qu'il ne fallait rien changer pour ne pas casser ni les perspectives, ni la valeur patrimoniale de la ville. Mais si nous ne changeons rien, nous le savons ici, je crois, entre nous, si nous ne changeons rien, Paris aura beau être une des plus belles villes du monde, si l'on ne peut plus y vivre parce qu'il va faire 50 ou 51 degrés dans quelques années et qu'on suffoquera sous l'effet de la pollution de l'air, alors il est inutile même d'imaginer un avenir pour la capitale et un avenir pour nos villes. Donc, il faut changer. Je voulais simplement rajouter cette dimension peut-être, ou en tout cas partager avec vous cette dimension qui est éminemment une dimension politique et que nous voyons, parce que c'est un combat, tout ça est une lutte de tous les jours et du quotidien pour transformer la ville. Et ça se voit sur l'ensemble des dispositifs ou l'ensemble des projets que nous avons, que nous sommes en train de mener. Que ce soit la zone à trafic limité que nous souhaitons installer, créer au centre de Paris et sur lequel, là encore, nous cherchons à designer, à organiser au mieux une réduction du trafic de transit dans le cœur de Paris, ce qui nous oblige d'une certaine manière à repenser le plan de circulation global de la capitale autour d'une logique dite en marguerite, c'est-à-dire encore une fois de casser les flux de transit, que ce soit les flux nord-sud ou est-ouest, pour permettre justement à la ville de se libérer d'une partie du trafic de transit, par exemple sur la zone centre, qui est aujourd'hui concernée par le projet de zone à trafic limité. C'est 45% de ce trafic qui est lié à un trafic de transit, c'est-à-dire des voitures qui ne s'arrêtent pas dans le centre de Paris, mais qui ne font que passer pour traverser la capitale. Donc, vous voyez bien qu'on a un enjeu là aujourd'hui à aller chasser ce trafic de transit et ce d'autant plus qu'à Paris, ça a été d'ailleurs indiqué dans une des cartographies qui a été projetée, c'est plus de 60% des Parisiens et des Parisiennes qui ne possèdent pas aujourd'hui de voiture. Il y a une accélération du mouvement de démotorisation et qui est particulièrement vrai dans les arrondissements de l'Est de Paris et du centre, qui sont plutôt des arrondissements plus progressistes et favorables à la politique que nous sommes en train de mener. Ensuite, de la même manière, nous travaillons par, j'ai envie de vous dire, par percolation sur l'espace public, en partant par exemple des écoles, ça a été dit par mon collègue londonien et par certains et certaines d'entre vous, les rues aux écoles. Notre objectif, c'est 300 rues aux écoles à créer et à mettre en place pendant le mandat, c'est-à-dire d'ici 2026. Nous avons dépassé les 200 rues aux écoles, c'est-à-dire des rues qui sont fermées complètement, lorsque nous pouvons le faire, ou partiellement à la circulation automobile. Et sur ces 300 rues, ce sont 100 rues que nous souhaitons aujourd'hui végétaliser, transformer radicalement pour pouvoir redonner de la place à la nature, redonner de la place aussi aux enfants et à leurs familles pour qu'elles puissent utiliser et jouir de l'espace public de manière pleine et entière, de manière aussi ludique et aussi évidemment parfaitement sécurisée. Ces écoles, ces rues aux écoles sont un petit peu des petits points dans toute la capitale pour que ça fasse effet boule de neige, pour que les gens s'approprient aussi un espace public libéré de la voiture et pour nous permettre évidemment d'aller plus loin. Tout ça rentre en résonance avec Embellir votre quartier, qui est un dispositif que nous avons créé, mis en place pour la réfection de l'ensemble des quartiers, de quartiers parisiens. Nous allons finir la première vague de 17 quartiers dans 17 arrondissements de Paris qui sont transformés dans des logiques de réduction de la part de la voiture et d'augmenter l'espace lié au transport en commun, les bus, aux piétons, aux vélos, à la nature. Ces quartiers, là encore, rentrent ou s'associent ou s'articulent avec le plan vélo que nous avons mené et que je mène dans ma délégation. C'est 250 millions d'euros et notre objectif, c'est de mailler l'ensemble de la capitale pour permettre à chacun et chacune, que vous soyez personnes âgées, que vous soyez jeunes parents, que vous soyez enfant, eh bien de pouvoir prendre votre vélo en toute sécurité, en toute sérénité dans la capitale parisienne. Aujourd'hui, nous avons un premier maillage de pistes cyclables. Je suis moi-même cycliste, donc je vois à la fois les progrès, mais aussi tout ce qu'il nous reste à faire dans la capitale française. Et je vois bien qu'il y a une explosion de l'usage du vélo. Ça change l'atmosphère, ça change l'état d'esprit, ça change aussi bien les représentations, les imaginaires qui sont aujourd'hui les nôtres. Et nous obtenons et nous avons enregistré ces dernières semaines des records successifs sur des grands axes, comme par exemple avenue de Sébastopol, qui est un axe nord-sud pour Paris, rue de Rivoli, est-ouest. Et on voit bien là, il suffit de se poser quelques minutes pour voir qu'il y a un succès et un engouement très fort aujourd'hui des Parisiennes et des Parisiens et plus globalement de l'ensemble des métropolitains et métropolitaines, parce que Paris n'est pas encore complètement intégré dans sa métropole. Eh bien, on voit qu'il y a cet engouement partout en ville et je peux vous dire que j'en suis ravi, très heureux et je crois que l'effort que nous faisons et que nous sommes en train de réaliser sur les infrastructures vont permettre de déployer au mieux cet engouement et de le traduire véritablement par un changement des mobilités pour aller vers des mobilités décarbonées. Juste un petit point peut-être pour terminer mon propos sur la proposition qui a été développée sur la place de la Concorde. Et je suis, alors évidemment, il y a plein de choses et que je trouve fantastiques, notamment en termes de renaturation et de propositions de nature en ville. Je ne sais pas si nous arriverons à aller jusque-là. Par contre, une chose est sûre, c'est que dans l'état d'esprit et dans la philosophie du projet qui nous a été présenté par les différentes associations, et je leur en remercie, eh bien, je crois qu'on partage complètement cet état d'esprit. Pour revenir sur le propos de notre après-midi, c'est vraiment de réduire la place de la voiture, de laisser dérouler ou en tout cas s'épandre, s'épancher d'une certaine manière de l'espace pour la nature, pour des jardins, pour des arbres, pour les piétons, pour les vélos et de réduire au maximum sur une petite partie de cette place qui est aujourd'hui un énorme rond-point dans lequel d'ailleurs il est extrêmement dangereux ou en tout cas anxiogène de se déplacer, et bien de pouvoir avoir une portion congrue pour l'automobile. Et je crois qu'en termes, là encore, d'imaginaire, de représentation, c'est typiquement ce que nous souhaitons faire dans la capitale et en tout cas ce que nous souhaitons réaliser malgré les oppositions, malgré les résistances, que ce soit d'une partie de la population ou peut-être parfois dans des jeux politiques qui nous empêchent d'aller aussi vite que nous le souhaitons dans la capitale. Voilà ce que je voulais partager avec vous sur l'évolution, la révolution peut-être que nous sommes en train de mener. J'ai oublié de parler aussi de la transformation des places de stationnement. Ça a été vu, j'ai vu une petite campagne de communication qui me semblait dans les présentations qui ont été faites en début d'atelier, qui me semblait tout à fait adaptée. On change Paris, on transforme chaque fois qu'on peut les places qui sont aujourd'hui dédiées à la voiture pour en faire autre chose. Ça nous oblige aussi à reconquérir les sous-sols parisiens, parce qu'on en parle peu, mais nous avons aujourd'hui de la possibilité foncière en sous-sol, notamment pour garer tout simplement les voitures, pour faire des centres de logistique urbaine, pour réaliser d'autres fonctions pour la ville. Une partie de notre ville aujourd'hui s'écrit dans ses sous-sols, dans ses parkings. Bref, nous sommes en train de changer. Je constate que toutes les grandes métropoles embrassent à bras-le-corps les grands enjeux qui sont les nôtres, climat, santé, nécessité de faire évoluer nos villes vers des mobilités plus apaisées et plus douces. Je m'en réjouis, on a beaucoup à apprendre les uns des autres. Et en tout cas, nous sommes très mobilisés, très portés aussi par notre élection, puisque nous sommes élus sur la base de ce programme, portés par les sondages que j'ai pu voir sur les 45% de Parisiens qui souhaitent la réduction de la voiture. Bref, je crois que nous sommes dans le sens de l'histoire. Je ne sais pas si nous faisons tout bien. Je ne sais pas si nous réaliserons tout ce que nous souhaitons faire. Je crains que non, mais il y aura du coup du travail pour les successeurs et les successeuses. Mais en tout cas, je souhaite que nous allions le plus loin possible dans la transformation de l'espace public en faveur des vélos, des transports en commun, des piétons et de la nature. Je vous remercie.
Thank you so much, David, for your thoughts there. We are running a little bit behind schedule. So thank you so much for all of our speakers. I'm moving on to our next one, and it's Ydanis Rodriguez, who is Commissioner of the Department of Transportation in New York. Thank you so much for being with us, Ydanis, and looking forward to seeing your presentation.
Thank you, Hira, and the rest of the panelists. For me, it's a great honor to be here, in this important conversation about the present and the future of transportation. My name is Ydanis Rodriguez, and I'm the Commissioner for the Department of Transportation. Not only the first Latino commissioner, the first Hispanic native language speaking, but also the first working class commissioner, a commissioner that has been living in the underserved community since I arrived here in 1983. So when I hear all the conversation about what are we doing in London, in Paris, in New York City, one of my questions that I had to myself is about, are we engaging also the working class community? Like when we do all the polls and all the survey, when we do any project, are we listening to them? And for me, this is something that I take it very seriously, because in my background as a former teacher, former council member for 12 years, I also have seen how society usually come to underserved community to tell them what to do. And I believe it is so important that we engage the communities as we design future plan related to transportation. Again, I'm happy to be here to learn and to share some of our city victories, as well as our future goals to continue making the city more pedestrians and cycle friendly. Our agency, under the leadership of our Mayor Eric Adams, has been focusing our effort to resources on the community that have been historically disinvested. This is something new, because this administration inherits a city that for many decades, it was not a priority to invest in underserved communities. Transportation touched the lives of all New Yorkers. We have been on the ground, visiting many communities, giving a voice to the people that have historically been left out of the table. All communities deserve to be part of the conversation. Urban planning must be a collaborative effort whenever we are determining the future of our street spaces. We are taking data in equity driving approach to address this nationwide epidemic of traffic violence. Our agency is working around the clock to deliver safety improvement projects that meet the safety need of New Yorkers. Let me first start by giving you all a brief overview of our agency. New York City DOT maintains over 12,000 miles of sidewalk, 799 bridges, and 4 tunnels. Our agency is composed of nearly 6,000 DOT employees. We are also proud to have over 200 employees dedicated to bike, pedestrians, and safety work. New York City only had 350 square miles, but we have 8.6 million residents. And when before COVID, we have 68 million visitors. And now by this time, more than 48 million. Our agency has taken a renewal look at how we can begin reimagining the use of our street for more than just car use. When it comes to reclaiming our streets, our city has faced many challenges during the effect of COVID. Now, as we emerge from COVID, we must ensure that our recovery is equitable and just. We are increasing public spaces for pedestrians and cyclists through our open streets program. I have made it clear that we must end our long-standing car culture if we wish to continue reclaiming a space for alternative uses. This image you see is of a street in northern Manhattan. This used to be a chaotic scene with car double parking trying to get to a nearby restaurant. We have transformed this corridor into one free of cars and added a new two-way bike lane so people can ride safely. We are doing this throughout the city. When it comes to open streets have created a safe haven for many communities in the outer boroughs who lack access to free public green space like park or greenway. During COVID, what we did was putting a lot of barricades to close the street. But this year, we are doing things different. They gave New Yorkers the opportunity to not only reimagine the use of the street, but also take advantage of the programming that is commonly found in these spaces. We are proud to have activated over 200 open streets, spanning across more than 300 blocks, for a total of more than 100 miles of open street in New York City. This could have not been possible without the close collaboration between our agencies and, most importantly, the participation of the communities. Another area we are excited to continue expanding is our public plazas. When it comes to public plazas, there are currently 86 public plazas in New York City, with community input through public visioning workshops. DOT and its partners draft a vision for each plaza that complements the architectures, cultural, and historically or surrounding neighborhood. We don't want to go and tell community what to do. We are encouraged the community to be part of this process. We are always working to find partners to continue expanding our public plazas program. Our hope is that some of our open street plazas can one day be turned into public plazas for the local residents and visitors to enjoy. When it comes to open restaurants program, our open restaurant program has also allowed us to reclaim a street for the alternative use and support our local economy by giving restaurants more room to work with. In some cases, restaurants who were able to apply to our open restaurant program doubled seating capacity, increasing their profit. The increase of profit went 19% more, 29% more in those communities that we have open restaurant compared to the other neighborhood where they were not taking advantage or using the sidewalk and the street to have those some seating area. Later in the presentation, we will go over just how much this program and the open street program help our small businesses. In all, 12,000 restaurants participated in the open street program, helping save over 100,000 jobs during the height of the pandemic. This is a program we are continuing to improve, and we are working with all stakeholders to continue improving the programs and guidelines. As our mayor said, New York City is coming back stronger than ever. I want to give you a sample of the 34th Avenue Paseo Park. This year on 34th Avenue in Queens, which is the most diverse borough that we have in New York City, 1.3 miles of the streets have been transformed into a lively public space that prioritizes pedestrians and cyclists. We know that our open streets are important to preserving the well-being of all road users. And on 34th Avenue, we saw almost a 42% drop in crashes involving pedestrians since implementing the open street. Paseo Park represents our golden standard for what open street should be across the city. When it comes to Car-Free Day, this year we celebrated the city's biggest Car-Free Earth Day event, something that I started when I was a council member years ago. DOT brought public space programming to 9 corridors across the 5 boroughs. We also connect this celebration with the expansion of our Open Suite program, which also provides programming. We partner with over 150 community organizations and city agencies to make this happen. When it comes to Summit Street, with the support of Mayor Eric Adams, we also announced the largest expansion to the annual Summit Street since it first began 13 years ago. New Yorkers of all ages and background enjoy 8 miles of car-free street, and for the first time expanded into East Harlem. Summit Street ran from Brooklyn Bridge through Park Avenue all the way to 190th Street, and there's already requests to continue expanding Summit Street to other boroughs. We partner with over 100 supporting groups who help us make it all happen. During the 3 Saturdays of August, we hosted Summit Street. We had over 120 citywide individual events on Open Street and plazas. When it comes to the 1,500 miles of bike lanes, during the month of October, in celebration of Bike-tober, we announced the newly redesigned Schermerhorn Street, which delivered 1.2 miles of protected bike lanes and much needed traffic calming measures. My team is building out safe, sustainable, and efficient transportation options. That includes aggressively building new bike lanes while upgrading existing ones. But we are also committed to make the fee for the use of bike more affordable to working class New Yorkers. We also recently cut the ribbon on the transformation of Bronxdale Avenue in the Eastern Bronx. This transformation project brings major safety improvements, including protected bike lanes on both sides of the street, turn speed reducers, intersection redesigns, and new pedestrian spaces to a Tier 1 priority investment area, connecting cyclists to and from the Bronx Park and between Morris Park and Park Churchill. We are talking about areas that in the past, because they are in the underserved community, they were never part of the priority in our great city of New York. But now under this leadership of Mayor Adams and myself, we are investing in those areas. During our Bronxdale announcement, we also announced a milestone of building 1,500 miles of bike lanes, making our city the largest bicycle network nationwide. This historic milestone marks just how far New York City has come to support of bicycling and sustainable, healthy, and fun way to get around. When it comes to bike lane hardening, this summer we are showing New Yorkers that bike lanes are protected for a reason, to keep our cyclists safe. Earlier this year, we announced our goal of hardening half 20 miles of the city's current delineators protected bike lanes by 2023. We also launched our Better Barriers Pilots program, which is an example of the innovative ways we are addressing traffic safety and improving our cycling network. Across the city, our team are working hard to continue hardening bike lanes so that cyclists remain safe on our street. We are using every tool in our toolbox to ensure that we are keeping pedestrians and cyclists safe. We must continue sharing our road with all those who use it. The street doesn't belong to car owners. The street belongs to all of us. When it came to Trick or Street, which was another initiative led by Mayor Adam and myself, this October, we were also very proud to announce Trick or Street. During Trick or Street, we turned dozens of streets throughout the city into car-free zones for Halloween between the hours of 4 p.m. and 8 p.m. When it came to the economic report related to Open Street, our agency also announced our new Streets of Recovery report detailing economic benefit of Open Street on the hospitality industry in Chinatown. Our Street for Recovery, the economic benefit of Open Street, is a first in the nation dive into the benefit of Open Street on the city hospitality industry. This is something that we did in conjunction, DOT and the Bloomberg team, in order to put the numbers together. Our finding found that open streets corridors significantly outperformed nearby corridors in their sales growth. Average sales were 19% above the pre-pandemic baseline, while nearby corridors who weren't part of open streets corridor were 29% below. In Manhattan, the Chinatown and Korean open streets retained 86% of pre-existing businesses, compared with just 67% on the control corridors. All open streets saw a faster increase in the number of restaurants and bar businesses after subtracting our closure of businesses than on control corridors or across the same borough. We aren't stopping there. We have many more planned we are working on for the near future. The future New York City street, Grand Army Plaza, you heard Sean Colley from the Transportation Alternative. The Grand Army Plaza is location known worldwide. We are in the process of developing design options for Grand Army Plaza. But as we're looking at the Grand Army Plaza, we are also looking mainly in the poorest area in New York City. If I, as a commissioner, we take any major project in the middle or upper class community, I would do it at the same time that I get any project in underserved community to happen to. The vast majority of residents and visitors walk, bike, or take another form of public transportation in New York City. When it comes to Graham Avenue improvements in Brooklyn, here in one example of where we are making changes that improve the safety of our street and prioritize pedestrians first. On Graham Avenue, we have added safer crossing, widening crosswalks to subway stairs, improve accessibility, and refine vehicular movement, all of which will help make this intersection safer. When it comes to East 117th Street, Pleasant Avenue in the East River Plaza, this is another sample where we made some changes that was on East 117th Pleasant Avenue near the East River Plaza. Pedestrians account for 77% of roadway user on this corridor. The changes we have made will provide additional pedestrian space, create shortened pedestrians crossing, and refine traffic movement. The work continues. We are very excited for what is coming in 2023. Today, we are excited to announce the Washington Bridge bicycle and pedestrian access improvement. On 10th Avenue, Manhattan, we are planning to add a protected bike lanes. On Westchester Avenue in the Bronx, we are adding a protected bike lanes. In various streets in Brooklyn, we are upgrading the open street with a two-way bike boulevard. On Ashland and Navy Hampton, also in Brooklyn, we are looking to add protected bike lanes on public space enhancements, and especially on Broadway in Manhattan, between Madison Square and Hope Square, we are looking forward to add two-way bike Boulevard Plaza and Share Street. El futuro de la ciudad de Nueva York está en nosotros asegurarnos de que las calles sean más seguras para los peatones y los ciclistas. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Ydanis, for your time and for your presentation. We have massively run over at this point. We were supposed to end at 3:30. We're now at coming up to 1:45. I know that there was a bunch of questions in the chat. You've all submitted a bunch of questions already in advance, and we're going to get those to the VIPs and upload them to our website and let you all know when they're ready. We'll be looking at ways to continue the conversations and explore questions together beyond the event itself. And we hope that will continue to provide opportunities for interaction and engagement. We know that there's still a lot to learn from everyone that's joined with us here today. We've got a list of actions you can take in your city to continue the car-free megacities work and make sure the future means a safer, cleaner, greener cities for all. I'm going to bring this to a close with a special thank you to our speakers, David Belliard, Seb Dance, and Ydanis Rodriguez. A huge thanks to our partners for putting together the event, and thank you to everyone who participated in our workshops in Paris, London, and New York, and helped us create our visions for the future. Thank you so much to the Possible team who are working really hard in the background to pull this all together. And of course, a huge thank you to everyone for being with us today. Thank you for sharing your time, your thoughts, your questions, your support and encouragement too. Finally, I'm going to encourage everyone to sign up for Possible updates at our website. We've still got work to come, including some new reports focusing on London, Paris, and New York that you don't want to miss. Have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you.